Okay, so welcome to the EEAI Vision 2020 conference. This is our panel session on the K-12 formal education track. Thank you to NIPSCO, Mary Lee Environmental Center of Goshen College, and the North American Association of Environmental Education for sponsoring the conference. Please mute your sound unless you're talking for the participants, and feel free to use the chat for questions or comments or to share something relevant to the presentation. You can also use the raise hand option if you have it, if you have a question to ask. So feel free to add questions into the chat. I'm also watching the Whova chat. We've got some questions that will get the conversation started, but as the conversation goes, you might have a question that arises. So please feel free to use that chat. I'll try to make sure I'm paying attention to it throughout. Okay, so I'll start off a question that I think a lot of people are asking and thinking about, and we're going to continue to be thinking about for a while. But how have you dealt with COVID challenges as an environmental educator?
I think I just put that in the chat.
Oh, there you go.
Honestly, that's been the biggest mental/emotional thing, that trying to teach to bubbles. You can't get the response. The kid that doesn't talk in class, you don't know if they're getting it, because you can only see if they're in my room, I can only see their eyes, and if they're online, I can only see a bubble. So you don't know, was that the cool, it might have been the coolest lesson. We're actually doing a climate change lesson right now in my current events class, but I'm not 100% sure they really think it's as cool as I think it's cool is.
I know in my school for kindergarten, we just went face-to-face after being virtual for the first 9 weeks, and the kids love being face-to-face. It's very different because they're all in chairs. It's total different kindergarten. Our parents, though, have set up lots of outdoor areas. So they use stumps that were all 6 feet apart in one big area, so we can take a class out there and do some learning outside. We have picnic tables they've put together in another section. They've tried to use every area so we can use some outdoor space, and they can have mask breaks at the same time and just kind of have a little bit of fresh air and out of their seats for a while, which they really like. As soon as I say we're going outside, it doesn't even have to be recess. They're very excited. They love sitting out there and listening to stories and doing different things. It's a little difficult when you have a virtual child sometimes, because you can't always take them with you because the internet doesn't always go that far. So you kind of have to schedule just right. But it's a challenge, but but you just have to be creative, and outdoors is really very helpful.
I'm in Noblesville and a K-5 school. I'm in the library, but I do some teaching in the classrooms as well. We have been in person since the start of school, or you're virtual. You're either one or the other. There's not a hybrid situation. So for me, the biggest thing is when I go into classrooms, we're no longer allowed to pull them down for story time to the rug. So like presenting, putting the stories up on the big screen. I've learned to take pictures of, my books as I go, so that I can just flip through as I'm going through my iPad. I can just flip through the pictures and read the book that way, and I can zoom in and kind of point out the things. So in some ways, it's making me much more tech savvy. But there's some weird things in the small world play and the loose parts play that I used to do with them, and maker spaces and things. That's a no-go this year. Everything they have has to go home with them, or has to be able to be cleaned in between each class. So
yeah, that kind of goes along with us. Anything that they do, they have their own iPads from the district, and they have to take a picture of their work and submit it online so we can see it. There's a little bit of paper passing and such as possible. And so, yeah, and none of the, like you said, the loose play, there no materials and stuff like that can be used.
And me, I'm just a curriculum creator, so I'm one of those lucky philosophers. But one thing I was trying to sell my superintendent was a whole different way of schooling. So maybe I can pass it on to you guys, that maybe you can talk to your superintendents. But what I wanted to do was, so we have 7,000 students total. And we have about 3,000 elementary students. And so I was thinking, let's take 700 high schoolers and have them be outdoor educators. Because what did the IDOE ask us to do is to get kids outdoors as much as possible. And so, and why did I say 700 to 3,000? Because I thought it would be great to have a 4-to-1 ratio, 5-to-1 ratio, and then have that high schooler be in charge of just taking kids out and getting lost in the town, doing community service, as well as outdoor education, as well as skipping rocks, etc. Haven't quite been able to sell them on that yet, but it's a great, in my opinion, how educational it would be for those high schoolers to understand how to control, manage, entertain, edutain those students. And for those elementary kids, man, would they eat it up to be there with a high schooler. I remember when I was an elementary kid, I just loved those high schoolers. They were mentors, heroes, I should say, more than that. And you could also do math. You could do, you could read books outside, and try your darndest to have kids dressed as well as possible. You can have them go out for half day or a full day.
Dawn and I have found that when we started, especially when she started, and she'll I'm sure add to this, in adding in environmental education, it was more do it and beg forgiveness if we need to later. I have found that with my history classes, government class, whatever class I'm teaching in social studies, it's more, I'll incorporate it. And if somebody wants to really challenge me on it, then we'll have a long conversation, and I'll use my email list that I get from EEAI. Okay.
Well, and let me just say real quick, so I was so excited to ask you questions. I didn't have you introduce yourselves. So you kind of have a little bit already through that question, which works to my favor since I forgot. But why don't we go ahead now? I know that some of you know each other, but go ahead and we'll start with Taryn maybe, and just give a little background of who you are and why you're here. And then maybe what your favorite way to rejuvenate in nature is, because I think we've all used those things a lot this year, and maybe you found something new as well.
All right. Well, I am a librarian. I have been a librarian for about 20 years now. I've been in high school, middle school, and I'm now at elementary level. I also called myself a stay-at-home librarian with my little kids when they were born. I have twins, and so I stayed home with them. And that was kind of the pivotal point in my educational career, was that I figured out that a lot of my educational beliefs prior to having kids, I realized that those weren't really very developmentally accurate. So really changed the way I thought about teaching kids and giving them those experiential learning. So that's kind of my goal now in the library, is to give those experiential times for the kids, because I feel like that's really lacking in schools, especially this year. They can't touch things as much. Then we also have, we're at Noblesville, we're on a shortened school day. So our school day got cut by about an hour. And then we're also doing double buses. So it's really almost like an hour and a half shorter than the normal day. So they're really just focusing on reading and writing, get that stuff down that we need to get done, face to face, and hope we don't, when we need to go virtual, then we'll kind of go into more of the fun stuff. So as a result of the new schedule, I am also teaching a specials class, so art, music, and all that. I am part of that rotation, not as a librarian, just as a teacher. And so they said, do what you want, just have fun with it. So that's what I do, is a lot of nature stuff, as well as some library skills tucked in there. And I try to make it fun. So, because I really feel like that's missing this year. Oh, and rejuvenation and so I have to be honest with you, I'm the newbie to this whole environmental education. Again, I didn't really come into it from that background. I just kind of discovered it. My kids love the outdoors. My husband loves the outdoors. I was the, hot house plant that was like, no, you guys go camping. I'll read at home for the weekend. And so then when all this came down, I discovered I actually like camping. All it took was a portaloo. I just needed my own bathroom facility nearby the tent, and I was good. So there you go.
Troy, how about you?
Well, this is year 24 for me as a classroom teacher. And as I've been telling people, I have 5 more semesters till I'm allowed to graduate. I started with world geography, and actually it's the geography side of things which has pulled me more and more into the environmental stuff. Going to conferences, EEAI and PLT conferences, was actually me just being the eye candy to make Dawn look better when we went to those conferences. So, so now I've gotten, kind of hooked on it. I got myself last week into a standards and curriculum thing with the DOE on the environmental studies class that they have, and they're putting formal standards together focused on climate change. So I gave them a little bit of the social studies side of things. And so I've been trying to pull more and more environmental stuff into my social studies world. I'm president-elect now for Indiana Council for Social Studies, and I'm also on the board for the Geography Educators. So those two worlds fit EEAI, and I keep talking about them. I'm actually now, I've talked them into adjusting things so we no longer have our board meetings on Earth Day. So, it just seems like it's logical that it all fits together. And lately, it makes sense that we need to get out and do more outside, because that's what we're doing. I mean, my windows are even open because that's a recommendation for reducing the COVID stuff. So I've already warned my children that they will bring blankets if you have to. It's going to get cold in the classroom. And really, for the rejuvenation stuff, it's been, we took the children camping even when they were little. Going to one of the state parks, especially Spring Mill or McCormick's Creek, is our way of leaving everything behind. And fortunately, especially McCormick's Creek, you can't even get cell signals. So that helps.
Paul, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Well, I'm been an environmental educator for a very long time. I got my master's at IU Bloomington in outdoor resources management with an emphasis in environmental education. Went from there to the Great Smoky Mountains Institute at Tremont and was the education coordinator there for 2 years. And besides being an education coordinator, I was also a part-time backpacker, taking kids out backpacking, and then also part-time storyteller, and so song singer. So I'd have to teach people how to sing songs at the campfires. But then I was offered a job at Mary Lee Environmental Learning Center of Goshen College, where I was an environmental education professor for 15 years and the education director. And there I made sure 6,000 kids enjoyed themselves every year. doing this and that, going in wetlands and woods and making syrup, maple syrup, and etc. I also taught a pre-service class to elementary educators. And then I also taught 2 graduate level courses, one in Principles of Environmental Education, and another one, History and Issues of Environmental Education. But Mary Lee is 45 minutes from Goshen College, so I got tired of driving down there every day. And so I tried to become a 7th grade science teacher. So to go from graduate students to 7th graders, ooh boy, that was a hard job. And I learned that education is 85% management and 15% education. Kids were great. I'd say 97% of them were great. There was that 3% that just drove me bonkers, who didn't want to be there. And I did get in trouble for taking kids outdoors too many times, but that was my job, is to get the kids out there to enjoy themselves and feel the dirt, especially since 7th grade standards is all about soil and understanding it. But then I decided to try something new because I'm a real big believer in lifelong learning. I became a purchaser at aluminum trailer company. And why? Because I really wanted to learn how to speak a different language. And I don't mean Spanish or Pennsylvania Dutch. I wanted to speak industry. And so, and boy, was it eye-opening. You know how we, in environmental education, we learn about the web of life. Well, there's a web of trailers. So you have to understand how the trailer gets put together. And you have to learn about purchasing and toxicity of what you purchase. So my job was a waste eliminator as well, to get rid of different kinds of waste, toxicity, but also trying to buy local if possible. And they actually would utilize mahogany inside a couple of the trailers. And I said, well, why don't you just use locust instead? And so they found locust to use, which I thought was fantastic. But then in October 2018, the IPCC report came out, and I was a little bummed about that. So I texted my buddy, the mayor of Goshen, and said, let's have coffee. He let me write a curriculum that was based on stewardship, sense of place, issue investigation, and creating solutions. And so that's what I did last year. This year, I'm actually helping out the Elkhart County Food Council do assessments of food pantries because we're worried about food security. And I'm also a resiliency coordinator for Earth Charter Indiana. And then I'm doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that as well. I wrote a coloring book with Krista Daniels' husband. He did the drawings and I did all the writing and figuring out how to make it. And I'm working on a field guide right now, and I'm also working on some essays. So I keep myself busy and out of trouble, but how do I rejuvenate? I started a club with my sister-in-law called the Wanderlusters. And we go out every weekend to go for a hike. And so we've been to Potato Creek State Park and Oxbow and River Preserve and Pokagon. And next weekend we're going to Kalamazoo Nature Center. So every weekend we try to get on the trail so we can breathe more oxygen and be without a mask because we try to keep ourselves distance. And in the woods you can be that way. That's me.
Thanks, Paul. I'm going to come back to you because I have a question for you, but I want to get to Dawn. If she could tell us a little bit about herself.
Well, I have taught for several years in the Indianapolis Public Schools, and I've taught in a variety of different settings in IPS, the inner city, neighborhood schools. I've taught an environmental magnet. And right now I'm at an international baccalaureate school, and it's all been kindergarten through third grade that I've taught, mainly kindergarten. At each of the schools, I got into environmental several years ago. I came across Project Learning Tree and Project Wet and Wild, and I just fell in love with it and decided I was going to start creating with students outdoor learning labs. And so I either, at each of the schools that I was at, I either helped create one from scratch or revived one that was already there that hadn't been used for several years. And then teachers then got interested and then worked through lessons and kind of worked with the teachers on how to use it with their students and such. That's kind of how I got kind of started in environmental education. I still do a lot of different things. I love using children's books just as springboards in my classroom. Right now, I've done that for years, but right now in our IB classrooms, we have units, which are either science or social studies based, and that fits perfectly into environmental and in any area that we can find. We do a lot of things around the world, trying to teach kindergartners, at least around the world, about animals and living things and the importance of knowing about all of this information and getting them outside as much as we can and how does that compare to outside on the other side of the world and different categories like that. And I taught at Cold Spring Environmental Magnet for several years, worked a lot with grants and doing different things with my kindergarten class outside about runoff, and we planted trees to help run off into a pond that had frogs starting to gather at it and different things. So just a different, my favorite thing is to work in topics with little kids that a lot of people think little kids can't do that, but they can, and they love it. And just sparking that interest is one of my favorite things, taking kids out. So when I was listening last night and earlier today about the forest schools and such, that is just I just find that such an interesting way to teach, because kids just eat it up and they just absolutely love it. I do an after school nature club. I'm trying to figure out how I can do it virtually right now and how I can maybe deliver items to kids who want to do it. I usually do it kindergarten through second grade at my school I'm at, and then we could do the activities online together or such, because since they'll all have iPads. I've had some parents ask me, and I said, well, I'm gonna have to really brainstorm on this. I'm not a technology person, but I'll see what I can come up with. So that's kind of where I come from. I was also the Project Learning Tree Educator receiver in 2015 for the award, and got to do some travel around in different parts of the United States and learn all kinds of things that were just, I could take back to my classroom and still use today. To get away. And this time, as Troy was saying, we've done a lot of things where we'll call friends and say, hey, we're going to go to this park today. On Saturday, we're going to go to like Potato Creek. Anyone wants to meet us, and we'll go hiking. So we've had people meet us and we just go hiking for the day, pack your own picnic lunch, and the next weekend's another park and another set of friends. And so that's kind of what we've done. So we can, like Paul said, take our mask off and feel a little normal and just enjoy the outdoors. So, and friends. So
You're part of the Wanderlusters too. That's great.
yeah. It's a great thing. You can just get lost in the woods and not worry about anything.
Well, I have a question. Paul said something, and there was a question that I wanted to get to today, because I think that it's an important thing for non-formal educators to understand, so that way we can help formal educators. But Paul said that he would take his students out, and he got in trouble for it because he would take them out too often. And so my question for him, and kind of for everybody, but for him, how did you get in trouble, and was there a way that you could fix that, or was that kind of you couldn't fix it? And then the question that I wanted to ask was, what challenges do educators have in implementing EE in their classrooms? So those kind of go together. So Paul, I'll let you go first. How did you get in trouble? What did you do about it?
Permissions. So And that's the primary thing. And I didn't even think about, so right behind Goshen Middle School is a big, beautiful maple bottom swamp. And so that's where I'd take the kids in to go explore. But I didn't think you'd have to have permission slips since it was on site, but it was because you have to have permission slips if you're outside the building at our school. So, so to think about permission slips is very important, and safety. So they were all concerned about going into the woods because there might be something scary out there. Might fall in a hole, because we did dig a bunch of holes because we were digging for the ground. We were digging for groundwater. So then we found clay, which is great. But then we also covered up the holes with wood to make sure that no one fell in. What was your other question? You had two questions there.
Yeah, so then that kind of like goes into the so what challenges do educators have in implementing EE in their classrooms? And I think one big challenge would be that, right? So
Yeah.
being able to get them outside, and then maybe another challenge would be having an outside to get them to. But
Yeah.
what other, what kind of challenges do you or does any of the panel see that you've come up against that maybe you haven't found solutions for, or you have found solutions for?
Well, I had Mary Lee then come into my classroom and talk, but they had a charge, so that we had to have a budget for one. And then also we have a calendar. As a 7th grade science teacher, we had a certain calendar, and it was hard to fit in anything outside of that calendar. And so when you think of an environmental educator, you got to be able to put it inside that calendar and help fit it in there. If you don't do that, I know I was overwhelmed. I didn't want to add anything more than what I had, but I knew I had to entice and edutain and excite and inspire. And you have to do that by wowing the kids, because they're inundated with entertainment all the time with their little phones. So you have to educate and entice as much as you can and pretend you're a phone.
I would say right along with Paul with that is one thing that challenges I've come across is, especially in the beginning, is how does it meet to the standards? Because everything is very standards based, and how are you going to still meet the standards taking them outside? Are they still going to be learning? Are they still going to be doing those things? But once you show either the principal or the superintendent, whoever is kind of against it a little bit, once you show them that it does meet the standards, I can meet the standards outside as well as I can inside. It kind of sparks an interest for them too, and then they kind of are, oh well, hey, what else can we do? That's kind of the experience that I've had. Hasn't always been easy, like Paul said, we've all run into, I think, some situations similar to that, but especially with little guys, it's a little more difficult with little ones. But once it starts and they see how much they enjoy it and that they can learn everything that they still need to, they're right on board. So
I got lucky that 19 years of my teaching so far was at Arsenal Technical, which is a 75-acre campus to begin with. It was originally designed to be 9 through early college. So it's a small college setup, and it's also got a wonderful wooded area that they planted in 1918, 1919 of oak trees. So we've got a lot of space there to do things, and the kids are used to going from class to class outside. So it's not looked upon as strangely as doing that. Now, the one year that I taught at Center Grove and took them outside in my world history class, yeah, I did get some questions. What are you doing? Where does it say you're supposed to do that in the standards? we were actually doing tool making because it was an ancient civilizations class. So I was having them gather rocks and sticks. But it was interesting that I did, it's not so much pushback, but I got more questions than I expected.
Yes, and I'd say for, like, I'm at a very traditional public school. Our school was built on a farmland, like literally no trees. I mean, well, recently planted trees by us. That's it. So like, there's not a lot of exciting things to do outside of the classroom. Like, it's even hard to find sticks for them to pick up, you know? So I think that plays into a lot of these schools. You know, there's just not anything to entice them to go outside. But also going back to what Don said, like standards and time. I mean, it boils down to that a lot of times. So I think that's where, you know, people coming in who say, hey, we can teach this standard for you, come in and do it. We'll come in and do a virtual, and this is what we're covering, because that gives teachers room to breathe. And especially this year, I mean, like I said, at my school, with an hour and a half cut out of the day, they're just barely getting the stuff they have to get done accomplished. And so it's, you know, any way that you can save them time right now is very beneficial, but also just, you know, it's hard for them to have the focus right now to even go, hey, you know, we're dealing with so many other things. We cannot add one more thing to our plate right now. So I think that's a big challenge for this particular year. I think it's a big challenge pretty much every year. You know, nobody's real keen to add a lot of stuff, but especially this year.
My favorite field trip I created was actually just across the street. I forgot to get those waivers, dagnabbit. But what it was across the street, there was the hospital owns 6 acres, and they wanted to create a community garden. So they contacted me to help them with their community garden because they knew I used to work at Mary Lee. And so I said, sure, can I bring all 120 kids over to help out? And so they said, oh, they were ecstatic. And so I hired an Amish guy with his 3 horses and his plow, and he plowed an acre of garden. So they got to watch horse and plow and an Amish man work together. And they also got to, because of science standards that we were talking about, it was all about soil types and animals that live within soil. And then they got to interview a farmer, the Amish guy, but also I invited a couple other farmers just to come and dialogue with the kids while the Amish guy was farming. And they found lots of worms and they found lots of critters, but the thing that disgusted them the most was the horse poop going into the soil, knowing that we're going to garden there. Yeah, but I said, that's just great fertilizer.
So thanks. That was a good conversation. And yeah, gross helps though, right? I mean, that it really does. It engages them and they love it and hate it all at the same time, but they're intrigued. So gross helps. So another question that I wanted to ask was, so one of the biggest challenges for schools is funding for field trips. And right now we're not doing a whole lot of field trips, but we will. It will come back. So experiential learning in nature is best done in nature, right? And that's where, you know, you can start to really make those connections. So what are some strategies teachers can take to get field trips funded? Because I think this can apply both to formal and non-formal educators, and that can help us non-formal educators in helping teachers get to us. So what are some ways that you've used?
Well, I know when I worked at some schools that were very limited on funds, we wrote grants. There actually are some very small grants out there that will provide money just for transportation or for entrance fees, even if it's to someplace that has a small fee per student. They will actually cover that also. So you just kind of have to look around for some small grants. Sometimes if you even ask the place where you're wanting to go and say, hey, do you know of any places that can help fund, or do you have any partnerships with educational, funding and such that could maybe help with a bus or such. I know I've done that for several years, and at the current school that I'm at, I don't need to, but previously I've used those types of things for several years, and it was very helpful.
I have found that nagging is a good way. Nag the school board, nag the principal, the PTA. Being a high school teacher, I've actually started to do that with my former kids, and say, hey, we need help with this, we need help with that, and every $5 donation is starts to add up pretty fast. I've never come across that one big benefactor. I keep telling people, if Ursay ever invites me to lunch, I will be more than happy to sit down with him and tell him how much I love the Colts, if that's what he needs to hear. But just not there yet.
Have you guys used InPause, Letha Youth Outdoor Fund? Because
Donors Choose.
They're pretty gracious. They're
Yes.
pretty easy to reach out to.
Mm-hmm.
And their grants are on a rolling basis, right? So it's not like you have to
Correct.
apply by a certain time.
Yeah, when I was on the board for 4-H here in Marion County, State Farm and Farm Bureau both were pretty approachable as well.
Yeah, I would say too, for those of you who are trying to meet up with teachers or kind of get your programming in schools or field trips to schools, like for Noblesville, we're allowed 2 per grade level, no more than that. So it's about getting teachers to choose you. And teachers, again, they just don't have a lot of time to do the research. Like I finally put together for my district just a Google Doc of like, these are all free places you can go. These are inexpensive. This is the, curriculum standards they're meeting, because it was just ridiculous how many times I don't know why I became the go-to person for field trips, but I kept getting teachers asking me, where can we go? What can we do? We want to do something different. And so those of you, send them to me because I'll put them in our document. But a lot of times it's just they don't know where to go and they don't have time to do that research. So I don't know what the best strategy is, if you can get in an email or but even so we're right next door to Cool Creek Park, and my teachers didn't even know that Cool Creek would come in and do free programming. I mean, that's just how little people know about it. So I don't know how to get the word out better. But I do think there's a definite need for that. Maybe even at the state level, like if there was something on the DOE website of these are places that you can go for educational field trips. It would be great to have some sort of place for that.
We see that with professional development as well. Getting teachers especially are inundated with so much information, and that was before we all had to start teaching either half virtual or all virtual. It's finding, they want to find that one thing that helps increase their content or adds to what they're doing. And sometimes it's just getting them to open the email, but other times it's finding that giant list of things. I learned early on because I had a mentor who taught me that just get myself on listservs. And if I got tired of seeing it in my email, delete it. But, that's how I started getting more information about environmental stuff. And I'm one of the very few social studies teachers, might be the only one who joined Hasty, so I could get on their list too. I mean, it's just being able to connect to those people. And finding, I find that environmental groups tend to be much more gracious about helping us with the fees for professional development and field trips. And also the econ people seem to always find money. So if you ever need, connect with your local econ group at one of your colleges, because they always seem to know who's got the money out there.
Yeah, Troy, I used to work with NAAE doing their guidelines for excellence workshops. And an interesting thing, going back to what you talked about at the very beginning, interesting thing was we had this activity where you would go through all the guidelines and then figure out where science, social study, arts, math, and other things would fit in. And it's surprisingly in environmental education, we do all these dots. In environmental education, science was not number one. Actually, social studies was the most influential in environmental education, just because of what humans do to society. So we need to talk about, besides just nature, we need to talk about social studies outdoors.
Well, I'm also fighting with my brethren to stop calling climate change, stop allowing that argument on whether it's real or not. And a few of them are still calling evolution a theory. So, I'm trying to work on those history people.
Yeah.
I know, back to the grants, Troy mentioned Donors Choose, and that is an awesome thing. They've actually broadened their funding. They'll even do like professional development for educators, for people who work with students or children in different areas. They will also fund trips and such too. They'll also fund like virtual, if you want something to do virtual, since a lot of it is, I know schools can't have guests in and they can't go anywhere right now, but maybe something virtual might be something that can be put together to help also with some different things. Maybe supplies could be brought in, individual sets for students, and then a virtual professional come in and talk to them about what they're looking at and what they have in front of them. So Donors Choose is a great one, and they'll answer lots of questions and help you too if they have a great chat on there.
Well, and go ahead.
I would also just add to that, and try to get in touch with the librarians in the schools, because they're the people who disperse information. So if I get an email that says, hey, I've got this program, which is what's happened to me a couple times, and I've sent it on to the teachers that, hey, this looks interesting. And sometimes it works, and actually about half the time it works. Either they already had something planned or they were ready to do that. And I would also say to those of you offering virtual, just give it a little bit of time here. Those teachers who are either teaching virtually or are in class, the in-class people are finally opening up to have some time to kind of go. Because even in the library, I'm starting to get more requests of like, okay, now I'm ready to do this project, because they didn't think they were even going to get to it. So everything's been put on hold. And then also those teachers who are teaching virtually, they're getting tired of teaching virtually. They're going to want someone to come in and teach here and do a little something fun with their kids very soon. They just had to get settled into it. So we start early. We're August 1 in Noblesville. So we're just now getting to that point. We're in second quarter now. So I would hold tight. I think if you start hitting them up here in December and January, those teachers are going to really be more open to that idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Taryn, that anyone, professionals just coming in, even just talking to classrooms about what they do and their job and showing the tools, and explaining things or showing the procedure. That they would love that.
Well, and I'm not sure how many of you heard that I wrote a curriculum for the city of Goshen. And so I'd love to be able to talk with your superintendents as well. And this curriculum is basically a manual for teachers to do environmental education on their own. And and the manual is with the KISS philosophy, keep it simple. And also standards-based, both social studies and science and mathematics and English, and or language arts, sorry. And it's K through 5, so kindergarten is forced kindergarten, get the kids outdoors and play. outdoors. First grade, nature around your school, outdoors. And it's then lots of 10 different activities for teachers just to take them right outside their school and play. And second grade is to go back to where the kindergartners went to and observe nature during the 4 different seasons. Third grade, you become community science and you actually work with a local scientist. And so my job would be to help find that scientist in your neighborhood that could utilize your third graders. Fourth grade is to study local food systems and your cafeteria. And then fifth grade is then to help the kids understand your environmental problems and environmental issues that surround your community and how to address them. And so would love to talk to any, because I want to make this happen all around the entire state, maybe around the entire country, because it's a fantastic method of joy to action. What David Sobel was talking about is doing that ladder and finally figuring out at the very end that, man, fifth graders are powerful. They can do a lot of great things. And then sixth grade is even more powerful. So.
So we have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to ask one question, maybe one last question, maybe not. As the president of the board of EEAI, this one particularly interests me. And you've mentioned some things I think that would answer this question, but I want to ask it. So how can EEAI support you in your role? I hear be more of a resource, helping to make connections, and maybe even some professional development opportunities. What other ways can EEAI support you in your role?
Don't be afraid to zoom in. Don't necessarily wait to be asked. It's like with Paul's ideas there. Don't necessarily wait to be asked. Put it out there and put the hook in the water and see if we bite.
Yeah, I think what all of us have just said is kind of the same thing. Is teachers, like Taryn was just saying, teachers and students are ready. We've gotten settled in virtual or in face-to-face or both, and I think it's time that they're ready now to kind of get back to a little bit of normal, where they can have guests in virtually. It can still be a little bit of a normal feel and something different and exciting, and just bring a little bit of something different to the classroom, whether it be online or if they're having a face-to-face classroom. So come in, like Troy said, Zoom in, and they would love it.
Mine are about to turn on me if I have them answer one more discussion board or do a PowerPoint or send me a Flipgrid video. So they want to do something else.
Very much so. And I do think too, one thing I would like is, and perhaps you already have it. I apologize. I've not really gone through your website to a great extent. But I do think that like having that curriculum connection piece on your website that you can send to schools, because for example, I was just looking through my school's matrix today and they had all kinds of resources listed through there. So if you can get yourself on those resources, like, oh, hey, so-and-so does a virtual experiment or a virtual talk, or go to this website to get those lesson plans, and it just gets them to your page. And then from there, they're going to find the other things as well. So I think that anytime you can have something that teachers can link into, and contacting those curriculum departments of schools would be helpful as well.
And for me with EEI, it's just having that great connection network of friends, for one. That's probably number one, is friendship. But number two is all that wisdom and inspiration and motivation. So it's great to hear from other formal educators that are part of EEAI, because EEAI should be, maybe this is something EEAI could do, is help grow and expand the formal portion of the membership, because we need a lot more. We need all teachers in EAI. We need EAI to be like hasty. I mean, then that takes away from the ambiance of EAI, but to be a force, we have to get bigger.
And that's something to consider. I mean, I don't know financially how that would phase out, but even just like offering a free membership to teachers or a discounted membership to teachers, because I think that people are interested in it. They just aren't going to go there. Like I said, for time, money, everything else, they aren't going to do it. Another thing I would recommend, I don't know how, if you have a social media manager or how that's working for you, but finding those districts and teachers who are doing really great things and tweeting about it. I know like Hamilton Southeast does amazing stuff with some of their schools, you know, especially for just a general public school. We're not looking at any, you know, special or, you know, I'm going to say outside the norm, but you know what I'm saying? Like not a traditional public school. So Hamilton Southeast is doing some great stuff, and that I've gotten so many great ideas from following their teachers, but just retweeting those, it just helps. Like when somebody retweets something I did, it makes it seem more valuable and that somebody noticed I did it. So I think by, you know, retweeting and just kind of making people see that, or allowing people to see that you're seeing them, really increases that. And then because you retweeted it, I'm now seeing something that was in Muncie that I wouldn't have normally seen. And now I'm going to follow that person and we're going to be able to share ideas. So I think that that's a great way to like start getting the word out and showing off those teachers who are really, really doing it.
Yeah, before we all got quarantined, Indiana Council on Social Studies was doing pub PDs. So we were going to different corners of the state, meeting at a bar, and then bringing a couple of experts in on a particular topic. And then we would offer a couple of hours. We would pay for the appetizers, and then a couple of hours, everybody would get a couple of hours of PGPs. And that was working pretty good. Geography educators did a couple of them. It was just a way of, you know, I think our best one had down by IU had like, I don't know, 12 people at it. Most of them had 6 to 8. It was a nice conversation. We're actually, our next meeting, we're going to see if we can adjust that to get back on the virtual, because the whole idea of not connecting, really, that was one of the things that, you know, Dawn and I talked about this weekend. You know, we're not getting to go to a park, or we're not getting out there this weekend. Do we really want to still do this? And it was still, you know, keeping that connection going. We didn't get to hang out with Donna Rogler this summer, you know. We've done that, you know, off and on every couple of years. Just those kinds of things of keeping these things going. You know, she at least gets to practice a lot of her PLT stuff. I only get to dabble with it with my high schoolers. So the more connection we can also have with the adults, I think the better we all become in transferring that information to the kids.
I think sorry. I was just going to say real quick, I put it in the chat there, but just also in this time right now when teachers are searching just for creativity and some different ways to reach things, this would be a great time to reach out to schools and to teachers and let them know. Like someone telling me, if I didn't know, you can take your class, even if you don't have a big area outside, take them to the playground area, just your class, and you can do this activity with them in their environment. And still meet standards. So I think that's an important thing, just to get thinking outside the box and helping teachers do that in this crazy time.
And Sarah commented that asked if it would be helpful for teachers if we offered Zoom chat to showcase an easy lesson that teachers could use with their students. And I think that's kind of what you're saying there. Yeah.
And it depends on the person. Offering a video they can watch later is good, especially if they have kids at home, so they can watch it at their leisure. We are empty nesters, so you know, hooking up to one more Zoom is not that big a deal.
And I
Well,
see, yes, doing
yeah,
a video might be something that's a little more available for teachers because they can access it when they have the time.
right. And another thing too is once you have that video link, they're going to send it to their friend or, to their, all of grade 2 is going to get it and they're all going to talk about it. Versus if it's a Zoom, one of them might attend and then it's going to go through that whole, telephone activity where half of it's going to get lost in translation. So there's
And you
that.
might even consider, going back to what you were saying earlier, we have been doing this, another group that I got myself into, it's with the Indianapolis Sister Cities. It's a teacher and student outreach committee. They have been doing interviewing global leaders, but having students interview them, and then we post those videos. So even doing little things like that, little videos of leaders in environmental education or leaders in any of the environmental connected stuff that we can then connect to and utilize in our classroom, or find out about that person and then connect to them to then invite them to Zoom in. Any of that would be helpful.
There we go. Well, it is 6:30. Thanks to our panel. I think that there was some really great conversation here, and I know I was taking down notes like a crazy person. So I hope that other people were too. And this is being recorded, so you can revisit it again, or you can tell your friends. And then there was a lot of really good stuff in the chat as well. So we'll also have a copy of that. So thank you to our presenters, our panelists, and thanks to all our participants who were here and were asking some good questions and talking on the chat too. So with that, I think we'll say goodbye. So thank you very much. We will got our keynote speaker, Rachel Larimore, here in a few minutes. And then don't forget about our trivia tonight at 8:30. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.